All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to week 3 of creative writing. And we are off to the races. Finished up our week on fantasy and sci fi writing. And now we are going to focus on, I guess you could call it like a super genre. It's a genre above a lot of genres, but it's called modern fiction. It is huge. And so we're gonna start by simply giving it a definition. And because I honestly think that you guys probably know what modern fiction is, but it contains a lot of other genres that you think of as genres. So we have to make sure I define it and then give some examples. And then we'll get into 4 strategies or 4 conventions that I really want you to try using in your trial write this week. I'm not going to have an assigned reading and writer's lens this week simply because it's a short week according to the calendar. We don't have school Friday. And so I just don't feel right about adding that extra assignment in when technically you guys have a day off this week. So I'm going to take that away. So this week, really, your only assignment is to watch this video, read the note sheet that goes along with this video, and then begin your trial write and complete your trial write. If you do that, you'll be in really good shape. So um, that's the game plan. So 4 conventions of modern fiction. But let's define it first. Modern fiction is this: books in the modern fiction genre are made up of stories set in modern settings. They have technology and events that are close to or pertain to the current culture of the lives of their main characters in a today's setting. The modern genre would also include new and struggling social concepts and or thought processes. I actually disagree with this a little bit because it's saying that they have technology. They might not. Actually, modern fiction simply is a story that takes place at the time that it was written. Okay? So if it was written in 1800 and takes place in 1800, so the setting and the publication date are the same, it's technically a modern fiction. Now, sometimes we get into the subgenres too soon, which that would be a type of modern fiction called a classic, if it's still something we care to read, and it's from the 1800s. Um, and then you can also talk about I guess there's a whole debate there on if a classic is even a genre or not. But I define modern fiction simply as if it was published on a certain date and it takes place in a very close date. I don't think that we could put a timeline like 10 years or 20 years, like not that. But one of the ways I think about it is if the author lived through the events that this, of that, or lived through the setting, then it's modern fiction. So because think about it this way, there are a few World War II vets who still are alive today, and if they were to write a book like a modern fiction text or a fiction text on World War II, you wouldn't look back at that as historical fiction, because to them this isn't history, right? History is a concept from the eye of the beholder, right? And so if a World War II vet was writing a story about World War II, you would just view that as a war story, not not necessarily historical fiction. Okay, so if they lived through the time period they're writing about, I define that as modern fiction. And of course, because we are focusing on a piece of writing that is about the time it takes place, right? So the piece of writing is taking place at the time that it was written. It is almost always going to have a theme related to the modern society. And so many of the most common themes are the social standings of the oppressed, poor, and marginalized, government treatment of people as a whole, perhaps globalization and acculturation, shifting mindsets or attitudes towards tradition. These are our common themes, and theme is huge in modern fiction. When you write a story that's a modern fiction, you typically make it theme focused. Unlike fantasy and sci-fi, which are more entertainment focused, modern fiction is more themed focused. You're trying to get a point across, and you're using a story to do so. Um, I believe it was Chinua Adichie Ngozi who said, "We write stories because sentences won't do." Right? We write stories because sentences won't do. Think about it that way. When you are taking on something this big as social standings, government treatment, the difficulties or the joys of globalization, the kind of awkwardness of shifting mindsets and shifting attitudes, when you're taking those things on, you could write a sentence about them. But it really only matters more when you have a story. It matters a lot more when you have a story. So yeah, I really like that quote, right? We write stories because sentences won't do. So that's what modern fiction's all about. And of course, you could see this coming. Our first convention, therefore, is your story needs to be influenced by a modern setting and deal with modern conflicts. So when you do your trial, right, I don't want sci-fi. I don't want historical fiction. I don't want you to go back or forward too far. Excuse me, my throat. And you the way you can think about this is, again, you can say, did I live through it? Right? I'm writing about a time I've lived through, or it's in the future just a little bit so that I will live through it, and you could call that modern fiction. The other way you could think about it is it relevant to today? Maybe you pick a conflict that is relevant today, such as racism, sexism, the oppression of other minorities, struggle with mental health or self-image, conflict between a person and a collective, like a government entity, which would be like your dystopian, right? Usually those go forward in the future just a little bit, or 40 years in the case of 1984-ish. But the idea here is that you pick a topic that leads to a conflict that matters to today's audience. Okay, that's the goal. That's the goal. Your conflict, if your conflict is something that's not real, like because it's taking place so far away or so long ago and it can't relate to the readers, you're probably picking the wrong conflict. So, which leads us to our next point. Your character development should all be about representation and relation to the reader. So in fantasy and sci-fi, we always talked about how the characters need to interact and relate with the setting. We have this fictitious space. We created it. We imagined it. Now get your characters to blend with it. In modern fiction, that's not your goal at all. The setting is a real place. The setting is a real life. You don't need to make your setting the focal point. You need to make your characters relate to the audience, to the readers. And as you develop characters, the best way, and I would almost argue the only way that you can truly, truly do this is by developing interiority. Your characters need to have inner thoughts, personal struggles, beliefs, relationships, goals, etc. Okay, interiority. This is what the definition of interiority is. Excuse me, is it's that which constitutes a personality. Okay, your characters need to have a personality. They need to have something to them because that's how we relate to people. Okay, we don't relate to people if there's nothing to them in a book. So let's give them some sort of personality that makes them relatable. So interiority is a huge, huge, huge part of this. And if you can make your character an everyman, which means making them represent a larger group, that's a great strategy as well. So you make them relatable, but you can also make them representative, and that is what dystopias typically do, right? We talked about Fahrenheit 451 a little bit, and in a way, they're trying to make Guy Montag relatable in some ways and representative in some ways, and I feel like it went well. I don't need to just hate on Bradbury this whole class, but I think he didn't quite get the representation component that maybe like some of the characters in other dystopias like 1984, Brave New World, Clockwork Orange get, those get that huge representative faction going. So let me quickly just give you an example. I think this is beautiful. This is from The Alchemist. Beautiful story. Hopefully you've read it. If not, It's 150 pages. It's super short. It's like a novella. Beautiful writing, beautiful story, very simple, and it's got this interiority and relatability down. So let me just read this. The sun began its departure as well. The boy watched it through its trajectory for some time, until it was hidden behind the white houses surrounding the plaza. He recalled that when the sun had risen that morning, he was on another continent, still a shepherd with 60 sheep, and looking forward to meeting with a girl. That morning he had known everything that was going to happen to him as he walked through the familiar fields. But now, as the sun began to set, he was in a different country, a stranger in a strange land, where he couldn't even speak the language. He was no longer a shepherd, and he had nothing, not even the money to return and start everything over. All of this happened between sunrise and sunset, the boy thought. He was feeling sorry for himself, and lamenting the fact that his life could have changed so suddenly and so drastically. What a great piece of writing. Doesn't that make you want to read the book? You get this character, and we don't know what he looks like. We didn't even get physical description. We didn't even get those outside characteristics. All we got is interior. He's recalling that this is where I was when I woke up this morning. This is what I cared about. I wanted to take care of my sheep and meet a girl. Everything that I know. And now, look where I am. I feel sorry for myself. This is beautiful writing that encapsulates this idea that I'm trying to get at. So one strategy I want to give you guys, and I don't think I made a slide for this, so you're just going to have to listen at this point. One strategy that I really, really like for developing interiority is called the pairs strategy. Let me actually share my document notes with you. That when I make these videos, I make a note sheet, and then that helps me to stay organized. And let me pull up my notes sheet if I can. What is modern fiction? So I just have, that's what this is. I go off of it when I'm giving my videos. And so here's that strategy I wanted to share with you. When you're developing interiority in your characters, one strategy that you really might want to consider is what's called a pairs paragraph. P-A-I-R-S. And this is when you are introducing the character, you go with this pairs paragraph. P-A-I-R-S. You can also do Paris. I've seen people do Paris paragraphs, or you can do pars. You can cut certain things as well, pairs or pays, any combination of these. But you write a paragraph. You introduce the character, maybe share their name, or if you don't want to give them a name, who they are, like the boy, right? You do start with physical appearance. That's not interiority, but that's where you could start. 2 to 3 paragraphs. Tell me what he or she looks like. Then give them an action. Okay? Give them an action. In the example that I showed you earlier, he is looking over the sunset and recalling that his life has changed. What a great character introduction. Internal thoughts is next. This is you giving the character in your story personality. I don't know how to put it. It's giving them an internal side, an internal thought. It's giving your character something inside their head. He recalled that the sun, he had known everything. He was in a different country where he couldn't speak the language. He was feeling sorry for himself. Those are the verbs I want to see. He thought, he recalled, she realized, she wondered, she felt, he felt. These are the sentences I want to see. Okay? Really, really important. And then follow it up with a response to others. This, you have to have other characters in your story, but a response to others or an interaction with another character is a really great way of building personality. And then speech. Oh, We're going to spend a whole week on dialogue next week. Having good dialogue will make your character come to life. So end that paragraph with good dialogue. So you start your paragraph with physical appearance, you give them an action, you give them an internal thought, you have them interact with another character, and then they talk. If you do that in your paragraph, you will have a great paragraph. So pairs, write it down. Okay, let's continue moving forward in this. I guess I'll start from beginning and just go through. Number 3. I don't want you to worry too much about sentence structure and grammar. Yes, I want you to write complete sentences because you know how to. If you literally are trying to write a complete sentence and you mess it up because you struggle with that, then that's a mistake, right? That's called an error. But if you have the ability to mess around with sentence creation, I want you to. So here's a point from a book that I've really enjoyed called Steering the Craft. It's about creative writing. It's by Ursula Le Guin, the one who wrote The Ones Who Walked Away from Omelas. She is a modern fiction writer, and she says, play with sentence length and repetition. Long sentences are okay if they're simple. Shorter sentences can be used effectively if used sparingly. Okay? Grammar is less significant in this type of writing and should be used as a tool. So that gives you the opportunity to try some things like purposeful run-on sentences, starting sentences with a conjunction like and, but, or using fragments, fractures. Use the simplest sentences to convey the strongest truths. Think Hemingway, you guys. If you've never read Ernest Hemingway, you're depriving yourselves of one of the great, I would say, writers of everything. You know, he's probably one of the greatest writers of all time. And his sentences are so simple, so straightforward. And then all of a sudden he hits you with this long stream of conscious sentence. And it makes his whole style of writing more like thinking than reading. It's called stream of conscious style writing. It's almost as if you are thinking as you read. The narrator is sharing something in a way that's mimicking the pattern of the mind. It's beautiful. And that's the reason it's doing that is trying to connect with you, the reader. Obviously, Hemingway is very, very famous because his writing was so simple. And there was guys like William Faulkner around at the exact same time. And Faulkner, if you've ever read any of Faulkner's work, super long sentences, huge word choice. You'd almost need a dictionary to read his work. Everything was maximalist, and Hemingway, everything's minimalist. And Faulkner wrote to Hemingway and said, you need to learn to write. Don't you realize that your writing has no emotion because you don't know how to use big words? And Hemingway responded in this famous opinion article, and he said, poor Faulkner. He thinks big words means big emotions. I love that. Poor Faulkner. He thinks big words means big emotions. You can make amazing emotion with simple sentences. Okay? So I invite you to focus on, in modern fiction, the genre invites you to stop worrying about being so formal all the time and try to be more familiar. Create a tone in your writing that makes readers relate, right? Be familiar. Write in a way that's familiar, okay? Write like you speak, in other words. You don't need to be perfect on the grammar side with modern fiction. Moving on. The final thing I want to say, and this is, you probably won't even get to this in your writing pieces, but conflict resolution is optional. Look at these books. These are some of the best books ever written. Brave New World, 1984, Blood Meridian, Life of Pi, Handmaid's Tale, Yellow Wallpaper. That was going to be your writer's lens, but we're not going to do it. None of these have a happy ending. All of them end with the character not resolving the conflict. All of them end with the character succumbing to the conflict. Not a happy ending. No happily ever after. And this is so intentional because it leaves the reader seeing the outcome of not changing the current circumstances that form the conflict. Okay, the theme is the focus, right? You're trying to prove a point, and if your characters overcome the conflict, it doesn't prove the point nearly as well. When you leave that sour taste in the reader's mouth, that sour taste exists because they realize that the current conflict, which is a modern day issue because it relates to the real world, is how it is, and it's not going to change, and this character couldn't overcome it. There's no hero in the story. It's a very, very nice strategy. I really like it. So happy endings are optional with this. Please keep that in mind. So those, I think that's all I've got. Those are my 4 strategies this week. And again, everything's about relatability. Everything's about relevance. You're going to pick a modern conflict. You're going to create characters that relate to the readers as much as possible. Try the pairs paragraph. You're going to try to make your writing mimic thinking or speaking. And then you are going to decide if you even want to resolve that conflict or not. You're going to choose, I want my theme to come across or not in a certain way. Here's how I'm going to do it. Okay. So these are the decisions you need to think about for your trial write. Okay. If you can get really good at playing around with these decisions, you will be able to write a great piece. Your trial write's going to just be done on Wednesday, and I'll make it due Sunday, just in case people want to do it over the long weekend, or if you're an online learner, you can do it over the weekend, up to you. It's the only thing you have to do today. Watch this video. I recommend trying to do a pairs paragraph in your trial write, and then go from there. Yeah. Very ambiguous this week, not having a writer's lens to kind of ground ourselves, but I'm not in the business of giving you guys work to do on your day off. So I hope that this video helps you understand modern fiction a little bit better and start getting an idea in your mind that you want to start writing about. All right, cheers, y'all. Thanks. See ya.